Well, hello and welcome, Maverick Traders. It's the 23rd of May. Joe with you here on a Thursday. Let's jump into a currency recap. I'm going to give you my 2 cents. You guys know how this works, so take responsibility for the outlook. First thing I want to do is break out any sort of meaningful news of the day. We're going to break down the markets overall, technically, and then share setups with the community.
Disclaimer. This video was created for professional Forex and crypto traders. Maverick Currencies is a proprietary trading firm that employs professional traders around the world. Our traders trade firm capital and keep 70 to 80% of profits they generate. All trades and analysis in this video are for professional traders only. If you are interested in becoming a professional Forex and currency trader for Maverick, click the apply button in the video description. Let's break down what happened today.
As we move into the market analysis, I was actually a little bit surprised based on what the US equities did versus what the rest of currencies did. So let's just jump straight into it. Nvidia smashes its numbers. It announces a stock split. I believe it's valued. Nvidia by itself has more value to it than the whole German stock exchange. So yes, all sorts of rah-rah moments. However, the rest of the markets, including some commodities, specifically oil and gold, moved lower. So this was kind of a one and done event. We know that these markets were at new highs, at least the SPY and the Qs. So some sort of a profit taking off of good news is very, very common. So we're going to discuss what we can take away from this and how we can take advantage of it. Let's move into the currencies. Once again, little movement. I thought there was going to be a lot more participation, but not much. A little bit of a bump up in the yen and the dollar and the franc. Euro dropped a bit. The pound dropped barely. And this was after a really good number, GDP number from Great Britain that actually surged above resistance. It's still a very strong currency overall. The CAD slipped a little bit, and Aussie as well, and New Zealand dollar bumped up. So what's kind of cool about this, folks, not a lot changed from yesterday. One thing that I like, and we'll get there, is the CAD getting a little weaker. It does get me excited for maybe a potential of a short trade in the near future. Let's move on. The SPX down 0.74. The world index down as well, 0.72. That was pretty strong. Crypto dropped a bit. There was Ethereum was actually something we'll talk about because crypto overall did take a pretty good move to the downside, but Ethereum is showing some resilience. Gold and oil, like I say, the commodities dropped as well. So this was a general sell-off across a whole lot of stuff. In fact, folks, since I'm here, let me pull up a little bit of a chart. This is a heat map that we look at on the Maverick Trading side. And take a look at this. It's completely red. And the only thing that is actually green, well, there's one or two in there, but look at NVIDIA. Pretty much the majority of the reason why there was any sort of hope in these markets, but still not strong enough to keep that NASDAQ up, as the NASDAQ actually finished down 0.39% on its own. Moving into the cryptocurrencies, once again, we've got Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, Litecoin. They're all down quite a bit. You saw the index itself was down over 3% overall, but Ethereum hung in there and it's looking a little bit strong. I'm going to show you a chart on it. It's got me a little bit confused. It's something that I don't really want to get into bullish yet, but it does show outperformance. But before we get there, let's take a look at our outlook. It hasn't changed much. Yes, there is an amazing candle I'm going to talk about here in a second, but we are above the 20, above the 50. The 20-50 slope is there. Good surge above resistance, consolidating. So I'm going to keep that same +3 that we talked about yesterday. So what am I talking about? Let's just get straight to it. This is called a bearish engulfing candle pattern. And what this usually signifies is pretty much the end of something moving to the upside. We have seen these in the past. In fact, folks, let me go ahead and show you this. Let me get a better on there. There we go. Let me get a better drawing there. So that is another bearish engulfing candle, kind of signifying that, hey, we had a gap up, but it traded down, closed on its low, and it can subsequently relate to a move to the downside in the shorter term. Well, we've got the same thing going on. We also have the same thing going on at a pretty impressive level as we have broken above all-time highs, and we are now consolidating about those highs, which ultimately, folks, is super bullish. Now, one thing that I will give you is this needs to coincide with a volume usually outside of norm. Now, we saw back in the past here that that didn't happen and the market still did move lower, but the volume that I'm talking about, folks, is something more like this. And we didn't quite get that. So I'm not going to call this a blow off top. Also, another type of candlestick pattern here, which is a gap to the upside and then everything sells off, and blow off tops usually coincide very strong surge in the market. That is the most watched NVIDIA with AI that beats its numbers and gaps up higher. It almost creates a really good opportunity for traders to take profits and institutions to pull profits. Now, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It doesn't mean it's going to cause a bear market, but it most certainly can at least slow the ascension of maybe what's going on here overall. So I don't want to call this a bearish reversal or it's the end of the world. However, I will say that I expect a little bit of consolidation or even a retest, maybe back down here to the crossover or some support levels that we've seen in the past, or at least an opportunity for these markets to kind of take some profits or pull things off the table. It's actually completely healthy when it comes to a bullish market. So I really don't want to go ahead and flip over to the bear side because we are still bullish. It's just a pretty ominous candlestick that shows, hey, at least this bullish surge is going to pause or consolidate for the short term. Now, what does that leave us to do? Well, we're basically just kind of stuck with sideways to up, which is kind of what we're seeing in the currencies overall is this flight to safety. And I like how Rob identified that between the -1 and +1 because those seem to be the things that are moving. Real quick, before we get there, let's talk about some economic news. What's happening? There's not a whole lot going on. We know that the Great British Pound, or I should say the UK GDP came in pretty good, which has got it moving higher. Today we saw a pretty optimistic manufacturing number out of there. We do have a couple of things left. Well, geez, not much. We got a retail sales number coming out tomorrow for the UK. But past that, folks, there's really not much going on. There's not much left. The US had unemployment claims and manufacturing PMI both showing a little bit of strength. But I think the elephant in the room was definitely NVIDIA. It did well. It took off. The rest of the markets decided to sell off. So we'll see what that's going to do to these markets come Friday. So let's jump out and take a look at some of these currencies that might be of interest. As always, folks, let's just start from top to bottom here. I'm going to go briefly through some of these because there's really no change. Take a look at yesterday and today with the yen. It's showing that low base. It's kind of consolidating. Not a lot of opportunity there. The US dollar seems to be in a bull or a bear rally. Excuse me. It could hit a little bit of a reversal signal, but once again, nothing to act on. Here's the franc. The franc decided to do exactly opposite of what it did the previous day. We're going to see a lot of that, by the way, folks. This is the euro. Now, I'll tell you one thing. The euro did kind of raise an eyebrow. Now, there's a lot of, I should say, leggy candlesticks here. Now, when you break this down on the 4-hour, on the shorter term, and the 1 hour, we do have kind of some pretty cool things. So here's the 4-hour. I like this kind of high tight base going on. Obviously, going all the way back here, I would kind of look for something to break above this level, but this could be an opportunity to the upside. Yeah, I know, folks, the euro's at a 0, but I'm very tempted to kind of bump it up to a +1. I'm not going to because, one day doesn't make anything, but it's definitely on my radar. So let's move over to the pound. The pound was showing some pretty good strength, of course, after its announcement. However, I would expect a little bit of a hesitation here, which it has done. A pretty good move. When we get a currency that moves a little higher, basically any sort of chart that moves higher is going to take a little bit of a break. So it is still definitely in favor. It just didn't really follow through from yesterday. And that's fine considering kind of the rest of what I saw today. The CAD, this is another one that I would really, it's at a -1. It's close to being a little bit lower. I kind of want to move it to a -2, but I am kind of liking the pattern that it's developing here. So it is showing a little bit of weakness as it approaches some of these areas, or I should say support areas. What I do like about it is this descension, or I should say how it's descending when it comes to highs and lows. This would be a shorter term target here if it can continue to move lower. Now, what's tough about this, folks, we have to correlate this with our shorter term. So let's take a look at the 4-hour chart. Let me zoom in on it a little bit here. And we are really getting close to that base. This is a chart that I primarily focus a lot on day to day, and it looks to me like it's really, really getting to a point to where I could see this moving to a -2, or at least being one of the weaker pairings for some of the stuff I'm looking to trade moving forward. So we'll see if we can't do something with that. Moving over to the Aussie dollar, you could see it's getting a little bit weaker on the 4-hour chart. This doesn't correlate with its daily chart. Let me kind of shrink this in, folks, as it's kind of still in this pullback. It can take its time here. What's tough about this, folks, it's just like equity trading. I'm primarily an equity trader, if you guys know who I am. But I usually wait for these to pull back and maybe set a support level, reversal signal to move higher. So this is still in kind of a transition phase for me. So it's nothing that I'm really jumping out up and down to go trade anytime soon. And then one of the strongest, of course, is our New Zealand dollar, and it's just looking really good. I mean, it just kind of moved. It moved higher. It's got a little bit of a resistance here. You can see on that daily chart, but let's jump over to the shorter term and see if it's showing a little bit more resilience. And it is. We've got ourselves a little bit of a high base here. You can see up through this area, it's consolidating. You could be patient, wait for it to move higher. I don't think the 1-hour chart's going to give us any more, but it kind of is what it is. Now, overall, folks, I'm going to jump through the cryptos. They are what they are, but the one I really wanted to emphasize was Ethereum. And what was interesting about this was the move that it had over the last few days. And I'm going to kind of shrink out. This is a daily chart here because what ends up happening is it's very difficult to believe in a move like this. What I'm talking about is this. This is super difficult. We have, this whole descending pattern going on, and traders can refer to this as kind of a flag pattern. This can be bullish in the longer term. However, where the catch is, and I do like the volume. I'll give you that. I like the volume and the participation. It is definitely the most favorite of the currencies right now. I don't care why, but it is. But we need to see it stay here. And the first test is going to be what it does from this area here. It's got to come back and it's got to find a support level. Whether it pulls back to a previous support level. Gosh, I'll draw some lines. This is going to get really ugly here, folks, but I'll do it. Some areas in this, or if it decides it wants to go ahead and consolidate right where it's at these levels. And you can kind of correlate that with where it's at. And that will show you outperformance or resilience. Outside of that, it's too early. So it's really tough. I mean, the things that we've talked about so far, the Euro, the CAD, I like Ethereum. They're just a little bit too early, but they are definitely on my radar. So overall, folks, I'm not seeing a whole lot of change. A couple of things I would like to do. I would like to take this CAD and maybe move it down to a -2 and maybe bump the Euro up to a +1. I'm just seeing a little bit of that ascending triangle pattern, but it really hasn't done much for me. Once again, Ethereum seems to be, out of all those cryptos, it seems to be the one that actually has the most advantage, but it's kind of in this oversold bounce or surge to the upside. I want to see if it can sustain there. So I'm not going to make too many moves past that. I'm just going to kind of leave it to what Rob talked about, because I do believe in the pound franc combo. I do believe in the New Zealand franc combo. I think those are pretty good trades so far to this point. Like I say, I got these on my watch list. I don't want to push buttons today, but I am definitely going to be looking at them in the future. That being said, folks, I'm just going to go ahead and skip over the possible trades because they're the same as they were yesterday. This is more of a watch period than it is for me to be a little bit more specific on entry points just yet. So the U.S. markets moved lower. The S&P and the NASDAQ came off of new highs. There's something substantial there, folks, and maybe that's kind of why I'm hitting the pause button on pushing buttons, is because that is a pretty good gap to the upside that had a big negative reaction, a big move to the downside. Outside of that NVIDIA stock, nothing participated. I think it was an excuse for the markets to maybe lighten their loads or take money out. Obviously, that's just kind of an opinion, but let's follow what price action does moving forward. Not a lot of volume associated with it, so I do not want any of my bears to jump out and say, okay, it's time to be bearish, or some of my bulls to just abandon anything. Follow your charting. Currencies didn't do much considering the equity markets and the commodities move. Keep that in mind, folks. I mean, our pairings haven't changed from yesterday and the day before. So play relative strength and weakness as always, and make sure you position size accordingly, regardless of what you guys choose. Thank you for joining me. We'll talk to you next time. Bye, folks.